I'm co-coordinator of the program Culture Helps in Ukraine, which is realized due to the support of European Union. And its main aim is to minimize the impact of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, and especially in terms of mental health. And we work with audiences such as internally displaced people or people who have fled from Ukraine, and of course with children and adolescents who have found themselves in these circumstances. And we mostly work through art therapy practices because we believe that many things and challenges that people currently have can be solved via the intersection of culture, art, and psychology. That's why within the framework of this program, together with our partners from Therapy Force, we have developed a series of webinars for those practitioners who invest their resources into solving these problems, and also for everyone who's wishing to increase their competency in art therapy practices. That's why we're inviting you to join and share our webinars among your colleagues and those people who might be interested in these topics. And today we have an already familiar lecturer, Valeria Polska, our therapist, coach, and specialist in supporting mental health. And she'll be talking about the risks of working with vulnerable groups and safe spaces in our therapy projects. It's a very important topic for you if you have experience of working with people who have suffered from trauma or have mental disabilities. So it's always difficult to work with such people. So people who come to our groups have very different experiences. So it's really important to stay informed about these aspects and also know how to create safe spaces where people would feel themselves comfortable. And thank you, Lera, for being here with us today. And thank you very much, Ola. One quick organizational issue. Do we have time till 5 p.m.? Yeah, we have time till 5:30. So we were planning that our lecture would be for 1 hour and half an hour will be allocated to the Q&A session. So if you have questions to Valeria, you can put them down in the chat. And last time, the questions were answered throughout the webinar. So if this is more comfortable, this could be the case this time. So I will share my screen. Please let me know whether everything is clear and visible for you. I'll setting up my settings so that I can see everyone. Please put a plus in the chat if you see the presentation and everything is fine. Yeah. Regarding the chat and how we're going to work today, we have a lot of information. Some people see me for the first time and some not for the first time. Before we delve into the topic, I'll tell about how we work. So if you have questions throughout the webinar, please put them down in the chat. So if I have time and I'm able to answer that, I will be answering them. So just put down your questions when they emerge so that you don't lose these questions afterwards. And the second issue, so from time to time, I will ask questions and ask for feedback and ask whether everything is understandable. So just put pluses in the chat. Well, I must have been disconnected due to the electricity interruptions. Please let me know at which point you stop hearing me. Sorry for that. So I'll share my screen. So at which point did you stop hearing me? Yeah, so my biography. So let me know, please, if you can hear me well, because I'm using a mobile connection. Please put pluses if you can hear me okay. Yeah, I can see them. Just in case we have more technical issues, the event is going on and I will connect back. So about me, I'm art therapist and my specialization is art therapy and work with psychological trauma. So for the last 3 years, I've been focused on supporting mental health inside public organizations and businesses. And I also teach people to contact those people who need special attention and support considering their previous experience. So we could call them people with a certain degree of traumatization. But on the other hand, I just wanted to remind that everybody is traumatized, and this is a reality. And this is the reality not only of those who stay inside of the Ukraine, but also the reality of those people who have emigrated and also volunteers and also those people who face our Ukrainian experience at large. So today we will speak about how we could create safe spaces in our therapy project. We'll also discuss risks and we'll see whether my mobile connection will stay stable and how active you will be in terms of asking questions. And we're today going to welcome the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So if you're not ready to meet them, which are shame, anxiety, guilt, and anger, it will be very difficult for you to offer our therapy project to people. Please let me know who of you can feel these 4 horsemen of apocalypse inside of yourself. Please let me know, put a plus in the chat. So what about me? Frankly speaking, I have been facing them all the time. Yeah. So everyone who's acknowledging honestly that you have been facing them, yeah, I can congratulate you. You have a contact with yourself and you have authenticity and honesty. So if you have a contact with yourself, you can also contact with difficult emotions of those people who come to us. So, and when we're in a contact with ourselves, we balance between how we feel and whether we are resourceful when we go to people. For example, when we know that we have had very difficult circumstances today, but we need to pull ourselves together and go to the people and start working. And it's important for me to remind that even if we feel ourselves good and we feel that we have resource currently right now, still a part of energy is lacking because of the experience that we're currently undergoing. So all of us, can be said that all of us are a bit burnt out, and all of us need restoration and rest. So I'm suggesting, and I want to inspire you to keep our resilience, because without this, it will not be possible to face difficult cases in practice. So let's think together about what a safe space is. Just give me any initial, immediate associations that you might have with this word. Just put one or two words in the chat about what you think a safe space is. If I have my chat inactive, I will think that my internet is disconnected. Okay. Wherever there is no war or dangerous people, where there is no depreciation. So we'll be based, we need to take into consideration that part of our group cannot stay outside of the war circumstances. So let's think how we could find safe space in these circumstances that we find ourselves in. So where there is comfortable, where we can stay ourselves, comfort, calmness, friendly environment. So a space which is calm and where you can feel harmony. Yeah, thank you for your thought. So a safe space can be different. It can be physical, mental, and emotional. And separately, I have stated here another aspect of time. So when you're sharing your feelings, such as when you say that a safe space is a space without war, we're talking here about a physical space. So regarding the safe spaces in Ukraine, when we work in Ukraine, so these are shelters which are safe, where we need to feel ourselves secure and safe, so that we have electricity. Yeah, so for example, when you have body practices in our therapy project, we also need to warn and remind our participants that they need to wear comfortable outfits so that they can feel comfortable in terms of their body. So all of these aspects will be part of the safe space in terms of physical aspect. And you have also talked about being ourselves and where there is no depreciation. So we will talk about it later, but it's about emotional safety, where our emotions are not judged. And in terms of mental aspect. Safe spaces are spaces where there is no aggression around us. For example, when we sometimes may judge a certain social group or depreciate someone else's emotions, but have this been understandable so far so that I could proceed to the other topic? Is it understandable that a safe space can be safe emotionally, mentally, and physically? So I have defined the word time here for a purpose. I will share cases from my own practice. So I have replaced all the details that would allow to identify a person for the purposes of confidentiality. So, for example, why have I asked about time at the beginning of this webinar? Because there are people whose rhythm of living is very intensive. So it's really, so they can't really slow down. They can't afford themselves to do different things, such as for example, in one of my recent practices, I had a lady who works in a very big organization, and we had a certain list of practices that for her personally, it was necessary to just stay with her own creative process and just draw something. So I have understood that that's her need. And I just asked her if it would be okay for her if I proceeded with our program, but she would stay in her own space. And at the end, she said she was really grateful to me that I gave her this time, and I did not involve her in other exercises, and that she was really happy to have that time, and she felt like she had further strength to do something and proceed to other tasks. So time is a really important aspect that we need to consider because it will have an impact in an art therapy project. So the second aspect is the rules of the group and the rules of work. Just put one word, just one word, a, a rule that you would like to have in your group or your environment. So just some rule that is really relatable to you and is a support for you and is a symbol of a space. Yeah, respect. Yeah, respect is the main thing. Mutual respect. Yeah, thank you. What else? So respect is probably the basis of what we need to have when we go to people. So I really recommend that at least 5 different aspects should be enlisted and defined before you start your own project and host a group. So you could either suggest that the group itself creates their own rules, or you create them yourself. So just 5 different points that are important for you and for those people who are working with you. Acceptance, yeah, is also a very good aspect that we'll talk about later. So the next aspect is confidentiality. This means that all stories, emotions, and processes that take place in your art therapy project should only stay within the group. So these are achievements and property of group participants only. And the second issue related to this is that we ask our participants, of course, we can't control this, but we ask them not to disclose the details and stories that they have heard when inside the art therapy projects, because it's a really, really big aspect of safety. And sometimes we don't know what secrets people get to know in our therapy process. So this aspect of confidentiality, and so on the side of both organizers and also participants, is really profound. Who has had issues where some confidential information has been disclosed? Please let me know and put both in the chat. When confidentiality was breached in your project, or perhaps in some other projects that you have heard of, maybe in your professional environment. Yeah, I can see 1+. And I really want that confidentiality stays within the group. So the confidential information stays within the group, because it's a manifestation of care that you can ensure in your art therapy group. The next issue is respect. Many things can be related to this, such as rules of communication, distance to participants, how close physically we are to the participants, how close we stay to them physically, whether we touch them or not. Respect is a notion that means different things to different people, and we need to take that into consideration so that we don't end up with an unpleasant traumatic experience in our group. So from my practice, during one of the trainings, one of the coaches approached me, and she just touched me without any request or without any warning. So she touched my back, and I had a feeling that a wall touched my back. I got so scared. So it's an important issue that needs to be talked about, whether we can touch a person. Can we walk behind their back, especially when we were working with military people or people who have suffered from domestic violence? So the space behind one's back belongs to a special space that is related to respect. It is also important to mention that we need to teach our participants and stress out that it's really paramount not to comment other people's work, not to comment when there has been no request to do that. For example, when someone tells their story from their own experience and the other person says, it's just really nothing, it means nothing, and I have a more important story. So if you, especially if you're working with older people, this might happen. And we could include that in our group rule. Are these points understandable so far? So we have talked about safe spaces, confidentiality, respect. Please put 3 pluses in the chat so that I could see that these points are understandable. If you have any questions, don't forget to put them down in the chat. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, I can see it. Okay. Another very important aspect, creativity as a process and also as a result, is a continuation of one's self. When we create something, when we place our inner self on a drawing, on a sculpture, a dance, or any bodily manifestation, that is a print of our own self and our continuation. And there is a reason why this point comes right after the point about respect. So respectively, our attitude towards one's creativity should be the same as our attitude towards that person. So we need to provide the maximum possible, the maximal safety in our spaces. So it could be in the past that people put their drawings on the floor and someone stepped on that drawing with their foot. Or for example, someone is doing sound improvisation and at the same time, someone picks their phone and starts chatting in our environment where another person manifests themselves via a sound composition. So it should be separately mentioned that our safety, that we ensure, that we need to ensure when we take a work and interact with whatever the person has created, we ask questions such as, can I take this piece of artwork? Can you comment on it? Can I rotate it? So we need to ask all these questions when we interact with the result of the creativity of another person, because that will be the manifestation of respect to whatever they have created. Next, we don't provide any professional feedback or any professional assessment. Please let me know if there are people here in the chat who have had professional education in arts, or you have attended any institution where you had assessment throughout your education, or perhaps you have a person in your team who has had such an education in arts. A very important aspect here is that we can talk about this at the very beginning or at the end if a participant wants to. So cases when a participant wants to get professional feedback for their piece of work, it's very common. Oh. So many people would want some professional feedback on whatever they have drawn and how cool their artwork is. So what shall we do in such cases? Please let me know if you've had such experiences. So if you have an example, I would be happy to share that with the audience. So what do we do if we've been asked for any professional feedback? So one way to do this would be to tell them that we're not on a lesson, we're not on an assessed lesson or an exam, we're just expressing ourselves in a creative manner. So you just tell them, we're not on a lesson. I'm not going to assess anything. And you can, of course, say that you like their work, but there is an important moment. So if you don't like it, please don't tell them you like it, because the person will feel it. Yeah, they will know if you don't like it. And if they have some doubts, they will just know unconsciously that you don't like their work. So what do we do when we don't like their work? We say something like, it's interesting, it gives room for a thought, and things like that. And this is really the case because from my experience, most of the works that I did not like initially, they were not, it's not that they were evoking some negative emotions, but they were just not really understandable to me. So if we don't like their work, we try to look at these works with curiosity. So the highest level of communication would be, in this case, what do you personally think about your own piece of work? What do you feel? Please tell me about your work, and I want to get acquainted with it with your help. So there is a room for interaction in this case, and we can really find treasures in this room. So if a person has not found any treasures so far, we could find them together. I can see that Irina has written that an arts teacher appreciates every piece of art done by children. Yeah, I agree. I have a piece of work done from a child who's 6 years old, and I really appreciate it. I keep it on my fridge. And it's really about the point that we really give a lot of room for children, which is free of judgment. And the same thing should be the case with art therapy projects. We need to give a lot of safe and judgment-free space for our participants. We don't comment. Next point, we don't comment creativity of our participants with other people. So we don't allow them to comment the creativity of other people. We try to let them understand that everybody has their own process, and just please don't comment on or don't interpret other people's work, because someone's process is very slow, and if you give them any assessment, you can just ruin their process. Some people might not like the feedback, so just don't give any feedback unless it is assumed by the art therapy process itself. So what we do in this case, if discussion is assumed by the therapy process, for example, if at the end of our art process, we get to have a discussion, so in such cases, we ask participants to formulate their statements using I statements, such as, for example, when I look at your work, I feel this and this. When I get into contact with your creativity, I have the following thoughts. So again, getting back to the rules of the group, we can put these points in our group rules, and this way we would allow our participants have sort of a training on that. So if you know a person who will facilitate that process, or for example, if you as a therapist and a host can hear that participants don't use I statements, but just add up a lot of different feedback on other people's works, please just stay calm and confident, and just interrupt them and ask them to get back to I statements so that they can formulate their feedback using I statements. So from experience, after 2 or 3 times, any group is able to learn this approach so that they could use these I statements given their feedback. So you can see here that I have put it only by request. So on the one hand, interpretations of participants can give a lot of resource, but this is only the case with people who have a lot of resources and they are stable and are in normal good circumstances. So if this is the case, such people are ready to receive different comments and feedback on their creativity. But again, this should only be done by request. For example, if one participant says, hey, listen, I have a following association about your work. And if we see that the person who has created their work shows with the body language that they're not ready to accept that feedback, we could altogether interrupt that process and just ask them to stop at that point and get back to it later. And there is another point that how do we reply when participants ask us to give our professional feedback on their creative art? So we have discussed this question, and let me know, just please put 3 pluses in the chat if you bear with me and if this is understandable so far. Yeah, thank you. I can see your feedback. So all of these points that we have discussed so far is our preventive strike that we apply to our 4 horsemen apocalypse. Because when we ensure confidential space and when we have cared about the physical comfort of the participants, when we have group rules, when we are stable and resilient ourselves, I know my information, I'm ready to communicate with the people. And when I have that impulse and strength, and you've had a good sleep last night, and you've taken care about the team and the communication with the participants, and you know how to contact with respect, both with the participants and their results of their creative work. So, and when you're instructing your participants on how to give feedback, so all of this is like a red thread that cancels and deals with these 4 horsemen of apocalypse. This means that we have cared about our environment in order for it to be safe. If you have any questions so far, please let me know. Please do ask if you have any questions, and if not, we will proceed to another important point. We don't make diagnoses based on the results of creativity. What does this mean? This means that it is also related to the point where we don't give professional feedback. Similarly, we don't make diagnoses for example, for people who have a degree in health, education, psychology. For example, I'm studying towards towards a degree in clinical psychology. I can think of some diagnoses that people might have, but it is only psychiatrists who makes diagnoses. So when we work with people, we come across symbols that a client is creating, and with their own phenomenology that they're creating and using. For example, it's like a person's own Olympus, where they have certain symbols, and these symbols will emerge in these people's creativity. So we look at these symbols and we ask our client what this means to them, because some people may make us scared. We might see some problem in that, but in reality, it might be our own anxiety, our own guilt, our own shame, or some symbol that is meaningful for our own personal story. And that's why we ask questions our client. And it's important that if we see that there are the same symbols in several people's work, we ask each person separately and figure out what these symbols mean to these different people. Because, for example, for one person, a chair is just a chair, and for another person, a chair is a symbol of a traumatizing experience. And for some other person, a chair is associated with some performance. And that's why we need to differentiate and we need to treat those symbols personally. Another important aspect where we meet the horseman of apocalypse, that is called shame and guilt, is that some symbols might have double meaning for a client. So I will now show you some symbols, and I will ask you to write your immediate association that comes up when you see this symbol. We find ourselves in a space which is rapidly changing. This is dictated not only by the war and not only by the generation change. It is a very complex process altogether. So sometimes it happens that a client depicts. So, for example, a case from my practice, we were drawing we had a practice where internally displaced people had to draw a symbol from so they had to draw some plant that they associated with the resource. And many people used to draw a birch tree. And especially this was the case with older people. And they were drawing this birch tree. And they were in this creative process. And when they switched on the rational part, these birch trees started acquiring new meanings. So a birch tree is really associated with the landscape of the country who has invaded us, the country that we are fighting with. So at the point where people created their art piece. So at that point, that creative process was full of energy. But then when they switched on their mind, they started feeling shame and guilt and anger. So we'll talk later about what we need to do in cases like this. So I really need your attention with the next pictures. So the next symbols, yeah, so just whatever immediate associations you might have, please put them down in the chat. So the next symbol is a bear. What immediate associations do you have? So the immediate association to the word bear. So family, Russia, power, protection, power and protection, Russia. Yeah, everybody's right. The state that we're protecting ourselves from is really associated as the immediate association. Yeah. Uh, an ordinary symbol, a bear that we have in our Carpathian Mountains, it is already associated with Russia, and it is really important to take that into consideration. So the next symbol should not be really explained. What immediate associations do you have? For me, so I have my own associations with the Soviet things that come from childhood, because I was born before Ukraine's independence, and my space was filled with Soviet symbols. So on the one hand, this is my experience. On the other hand, this is related to our traumatizing reality right now. So you can see that the emotions can be very different. So on the one hand, there is this association with the grandma's stories. Can I clarify, is this a warm association? Did I understand this correctly, that your association with the grandma's stories are warm? Yeah. So there is really big clarity about the double meaning, these symbols. So the past, childhood. I can see you writing that the feeling that comes from the grandma's stories, the association is really warm, but when we switch on our mind, there is some disgust that is emerging. So if we were to do a similar practice, I can guarantee that there will be symbols that have double meanings, and we will face the horseman of apocalypse very clearly. So the next association is a uniform, the pixel, the military uniform. So these associations are war, fear, the armed forces, fear, armed forces. I'll share my own associations. For me, the uniform is associated with safety. I feel secure. And for me, it's about safety and protection. Again, this depends on the context. So if you work with the military and you have in your creative materials, your art materials, you have variations that resemble the uniform. Please remember that this can be a really big trigger because we can have uniforms from different countries, seasons, and brands. And if you work with the military or with the veterans, especially if you're working in hospitals, please learn which specific, which, what specific uniform might mean. And this will help you to be careful with this. So the next association is poppy flower. We put down your association. This is our last or pre-last association. Which associations do you have when you see a poppy flower? Favorite flowers, beauty, tenderness, never again, pain, summer. Okay, thank you. So you can see, I'll share my story. So we have 2 times to 5, 2 minutes to 5. So our lecture will be 15 minutes longer. Is everyone okay with that? So 15 minutes more we added to the lecture, and we'll have 15 minutes more for the Q&A session. But I thank you for this story. I will share it. So my son has recently started letter Z, and I've asked him what this means, and he said that this is the logo of our car Opel, and this was a big trigger for me. Thank you very much for this story. Triggers will change cases, and unfortunately, this will be the case, and this is our reality. We need to understand that the active phase of the war will be followed by the post-war period for another 5 or 10 years. So we need to figure out the symbols that carry double meanings for us or for people that we work with. Concerning the poppy flowers, from our experience, we had a big event and one person, a young man, was drawing poppy seeds amongst a big picture, and he started erasing them. And I asked him why he decided to erase them. So he said, I first have drawn them, and then I realized that this is not our symbol. I wanted to draw a resource, a symbol of resource, and this is a symbol from the past. So I asked him, what did you feel when you were drawing this poppy flower? What was your key emotion? And what did it mean to you before you stopped this process and started erasing it? So it turned out that all these associations about summer, about beauty, about so all of these, so he had all of these associations, but then he turned on his rational mind and it all stopped being so pleasant and positive because it acquired a different meaning. So the last association, a cross. what is your association when you see cross? Faith, death, religion. We already have polarized meanings: prayer, church, death, heroes of Ukraine, non-death, salvation. So you can already see from what we have in the chat that these symbols are very polarized. They're quite opposite. So what do we do when we see some symbols related, for example, to Requiem, or some when we're drawing something that gives us resource and strength, and we suddenly see a cross painted in black and not clearly understandable. So I approach that person, I get frightened myself, and I think that maybe I haven't paid enough attention to that person. I failed to take into consideration that this person might have some traumatic experience. So I start asking them questions, and I ask them to comment on their picture. So I ask, what have you depicted at the center of your picture? And they say, you know, this is my church. And they have such a radiating face, such a positive emotion. So the person has depicted whatever has brought the most biggest resource to them. So this is actually their own interpretation and their own strength. And I have already managed to feel one of the horsemen of the apocalypse and feel some kind of guilt that I have missed out on something. So even if, yeah, so by using such a simple question, what does this mean to you? You are able to calm down yourself and clarify things. So please let me know whether our today's discussion has been useful for you. Did you like it? And will you be? And could you think of anything else that could have a double meaning? While I'll have some water. Yes, thank you for the feedback. Yeah, I can see the interpretation. So another important point, if you, yeah, Anastasia is asking the question that I will first comment on Victoria's message. So if you have certain associations and emotions that are not really pleasant, please talk them through, or just draw them, or talk about them with your therapist or supervisor. So if there are any symbols that are traumatizing for you and which take a lot of energy from you, please work with this issue by using some art method, some therapy method, because it's also a part of our work and professional practice to be able to let go our negative emotions, but not take them out on the people that we work with, but just work them through. So the question is, how do we work with people when people have double meanings and attach double meanings to symbols and feel bad? Just be there just be there close to the person. If you have attended my first lecture where we talked about general issues, I was talking there about that it is important. I was saying that it's important to have at least one coordinator or one more therapist, so more than one person, so that one person could proceed with leading the process and the other person could stay with the person who needs attention. So we just stay near them and we give them the opportunity to feel that they are heard, they are seen, and that there is another person for them to be to stay in contact with. So next, we don't stimulate their emotions. We don't encourage them to cry or do anything. We don't tell them, come on, let's cry, you'll feel better. So if they have any emotions in connection to whatever they have depicted or created, we give them an opportunity to live through that emotion. Maybe cry, maybe feel anger, maybe, but we don't specifically stimulate that expression of emotion because we not always have the resource to handle those expressions. Next, we don't convince or persuade people. So if a person says, for me, it's a symbol of death, we don't say, no, this is not the case. Please don't persuade people. This will have an opposite effect. A person will start getting fixated on that symbol and they will concentrate more and more on that. If we have a contact with a person, we have allowed them to emote or feel sad, and some time has passed and they have calmed down. So then next we ask the following. When you were creating this, what was your first or initial feeling? Sometimes we need to ask that for 3 times. Sometimes we need to formulate it a bit different, and that's okay. It's not always the case that we will be heard from the very first time. So this is the case where in this polarity, a person starts finding whatever is true and genuine for them. So we're getting back to the point of resilience and the capacity to handle whatever the person feels at that moment. Which phrases can we use to show that we're near and to calm them down? Please remind me of that question at the end. Now, what are our risks? Our biggest risks are really... Thank you, Anastasia. You're actually asking about the upcoming slides. So there are certain social groups that need special attentions, but this does not mean that, well, we never know which person will allow a deeper contact with themselves and whether the process with them will be intensive or not. But with these categories, with these populations, you need to be especially attentive and careful. These are this relates primarily to the military and veterans. So these people stay in the civil environment, but they will come back to the war again, and they have specific patterns of thinking. So we need to be really careful. Another category is family members of the military. We have a lot of them currently, and they need special attention. And all these bullet points that I have enlisted are really important for their safety because they support those who fight. And a separate category is people who have suffered from loss and acute loss. And this is related not only to loss of family members, and we don't need to judge people here at this point. We don't need to judge because loss can be different. We can have loss of a dearest one. We can have a loss of a pet, loss of a house, and loss of something, some valuable thing. So all of these losses belong to the category of loss, but the intensity of emotions will be very high for these events. So the next point could be included into the category of undefined loss, the so-called undefined loss. So this is people who are family members of the military who have gone missing. And this is a special category because they have the disrupted connection with their dearest who have gone missing, and they still cherish the hope that this connection will be restored. And they live in circumstances where they have a high degree of uncertainty. I recommend to work with these people only in case when you have a lot of stability in yourself. Another category is persons who have suffered from sexual violence or people who have been internally displaced. For example, people who have been displaced from the occupied territories. So, for example, if you have a group where you might have persons who have suffered from sexual violence or from violence related to war, again, you need to be very careful and cautious. Please be there with them, and this is really effective with such people. I don't think this should be further explained. It's really obvious that they have different patterns of thinking and emotions, but yeah, if you have questions about this slide, please put them down in the chat. And I will tell more about the additional risks that might emerge. This is work with the color. For example, if you work with the military, I don't recommend adding dark colors or red color. I wouldn't recommend that. So shades of red or orange. So whatever could be related to double meaning. We need to be really careful when working with colors, with these colors. So we need to offer colors that would not cause additional traumatization. Another important point is music. For example, if you work with audio visual art, please be careful about what happens in this song or that composition, because we might have different attitudes to different pieces of music. People might interpret them differently. For example, during the first or the second month of the war, I decided to listen to my favorite tracks. I just realized that there was a sound of a siren at the beginning of one of my favorite tracks. I got really scared. I was unprepared to that. Again, if you're working with folk music, with Ukrainian folk music, and you're looking at the text, for example, in our folklore, we have a lot about loss, about expectations, uncertainty. So please look carefully at whatever you're offering to the group and be ready to come across cases where some pieces of music that are calming for some people might be more dramatic to people who are finding themselves in acute states. Let's proceed to the last slide. How do we maintain our own resilience? We have a number of aspects related to resilience. First is our body. This relates to how we do sport, how we move, how we stand, how we breathe, and also how we can support ourselves in terms of the body with practices such as yoga, yoga nidra, dance, also healthy nutrition and sleep. It is important to maintain such aspects such as food, sleep, rest, sport, and we need to find balance, but we need to support ourselves in that respect. So the next point is head. First, don't let yourself to be hated too much. Don't go into perfectionism or too many expectations. And remember that when we have a dialogue with ourselves, we can also use I statements. For example, instead of saying I am a fool, you could say, today I feel like a fool. So as a person who studies for a cognitive behavioral therapy degree, I could say that we need to adhere to these requirements as much as possible. The heart is anything that we can charge ourselves with in terms of emotions. So this is the opportunity to watch something pleasant or read nice books. Of course, all of these points are related, but all of these points. So these are anything that gives us good emotions. So spirit is also important. So I can say that, for example, in my current environment, different people attach different meanings to whatever is spirituality. So you might believe or not believe in something, but if you believe in something, this can also charge yourself via that connection with the spirit. And it's important to remember that we are currently finding ourselves in the state of an emotional burnout. So we need to constantly invest in ourselves. So here you can see my contact. You can still have 9 minutes to ask questions. If I have missed your question, please repeat them. But so far I can see I was able to answer all questions. So during the next 48 hours, you have the opportunity to ask me a question by any social media. So if you have additional questions, you still have 48 questions to ask, 48 hours to ask questions. You can write and contact me. And I hope that this was useful. And if this has been useful, please let me know, and please let me know what has been the most useful for you today. While the people are writing, I will share what was useful for me. Thank you very much for this structured information about how we should conduct ourselves and the practical cases. It was really valuable for me, and I was able to relate that to my own practice and how I need to react to different scenarios. I would appreciate if I could share these materials with our participants. Yeah, no problem, but I just noticed a misprint in my materials, and then I will be able to share it. Yeah, because these things are very important, and thank you very much for structuring this very clearly. I can't see any questions so far. Please let me know what has been the most useful for you. What has been the most memorable thing? So taking into the consideration that this is the end of the day work, and so the question is, where can we learn, where can we study art therapy? Yeah. So what are the aspects of the work with internally displaced people? Okay. Yeah. This is about the red color and working with the military. Yeah, this is common, but again, if this is not individual therapy, if this is if the state is quite acute, and if our activity is directed at feeding their stores, so respectively, it's not necessary for us to work through the trauma. Any work with the trauma, especially where the red color is a trigger, can lead us to the situation where we can end up with another traumatization. So this can take ages in individual therapy to work through that. So it's important that in our therapy projects, this is formulated for. So it is important that you offer this to people that would give them this resource and not traumatize them once again. So sometimes it could be the case that people would need to find their resource in art, in other colors. So where can we study art therapy? So the Ukrainian Art Therapy Association, please don't subscribe for courses to promise quick results. About work with internally displaced people and refugees. So please read everything that relates to the psychology of Gant. Yeah, so the double meanings of the symbols were useful. The safety of spaces. Yeah. Please clarify what you mean by the problem of home. Regarding the books that I can recommend, I have the past, I have some popular literature on that, but it has a very broad scope, so please specify the narrower domain that you're interested in. So we have another 3 minutes. Can you recommend books about migrants and art therapy? So whoever wants recommendations for books, please contact me on Facebook and I'll be able to recommend on that. So could you please contact me directly so that I could answer in more detail? And thank you very much to everyone. Thank you for being so active. And thank you, and thanks for your feedback. I can see that you have been able to reflect on some points. And I really want that you are able to impact the common good and that our Ukrainian mentality becomes better. I believe that art therapy works. I come from a family of people who have done art a lot for, and I can see that this really works for mental health. And thank you very much for your feedback. You still have 48 hours to get more feedback from me, regardless of when you watch this video. And again, I'm Valeria Polska, art therapist, coach. Ola, maybe you wanted to add something. Thanks very much for the great atmosphere. Yeah, with this webinar, we have come to the end of our series of Art Force webinars, but we will launch another series of webinars about our own mental resilience, and that will be for those who would like to learn more about themselves and how to make yourself stronger. Please follow us on our social media. And that's it basically. And thank you very much and have a great day and have a safe day. We also have air raid sirens right now. So let's take care and have a nice day. Thank you very much. Thank you.